Rust Belt Outdoors, sharing our passion for the outdoors and bringing more people outside with us. Welcome to the Rust Belt Outdoors. This is episode 1. On today's episode, I sat down with Mark Hutchinson, a good friend of mine. He goes over why he loves musky fishing and gives us some helpful tips and tricks on how to catch the fish. Mark has a great passion for this. It was a good conversation. I enjoyed sitting down talking to him. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it as much as I did.
So Mark Hutchinson, 32, small town, Pennsylvania. Graduated 2011, joined the Marine Corps, went to college for 2 years, bounced around, and now I'm landscaping in PA again. Yeah, the outdoors is just something that I've been kind of forced to be in since I was like as old as I could walk. My dad had me in the woods at 2, 3 years old, and it was just what you do around here. So yeah, I've kind of always had a fascination with the outdoors. I've just there's just if you've never been a part of it, you can't really understand the experiences that you get. But just kind of just some of the lessons I've learned, about discipline and sticking it out and going the extra mile in the woods and respecting nature and just kind of doing all of that. That's kind of where what draw me to the outdoors, I guess. So yeah, I guess if we can switch over to musky fishing.
Yeah, you guys hit that pretty hard all summer long, right?
Yeah, so typically I like to go right around this time of year, March, and then we'll
Yeah.
fish up until the water starts to get up into the temperature gets to around 85 degrees or
Oh,
so,
okay.
80 degrees. That's usually when we'll stop. So it's like early spring, late spring, early summer, and then we'll take that middle, dog days of summer off, and then usually once that the early onset of fall kicks back in, that's when we'll go out. But it's musky fishing is it's one of those things, well, just fishing in general, it's like you and I could have the same fishing pole with the same lure, fishing the same hole, and I could catch 10 and you could catch none. So there's a little bit of that mystery factor of, you just quite don't know what it is that gets them to strike sometimes, whether it's the temperature, the time of day, oh, there was a storm last night, there's a cold front, that everybody has their theories on what, makes you successful, but in my opinion, it's just as simple as doing it. You have to go fish for them, and you got to be focused when you're doing it. Because there's a lot of little nuances to it. Little 1% things that you can do better during any fishing outing that will increase your chances of success. So it's like you could cast out and be reeling in, and then the muskie hits, and you have like sometimes you get lucky and they just eat your whole lure and they're just hooked. And then you just reel in and you catch a fish. Other times, they might strike from the right, from the left, from under, and that little 1 second window from the time they grab your lure and let go, you have to make a decision on which way to set your hook. Um, One of the most commonly messed up things is a lot of people, bass fishing, you always set the hook straight up. While muskie have a bone plate on the roof of their mouth. So if you try and set the hook up, you're just trying to set your hook into bone, which is a really low success rate. So usually, they say sweep the rod left to right. So, if I'm reeling in right to left and the muskie comes in behind, I don't want to pull away from it because you're
Right.
probably going to pull it out. So, like, just those little scenarios, or you're reeling in and you look to the left and a muskie hits and you don't even notice sometimes. So, just kind of attention to detail and just fishing, that's about it. I get asked all the time, well, where do you go, man? Give me some spots. Tell me where to go. And it's like, we live in Western Pennsylvania. There's musky. Like you can Google any body of water we live in, whether it's the Allegheny River, French Creek, Woodcock Lake right here in Meadville, all have muskies, and it's like, go out fishing and find them. It's like you could fish the same spot 100 days in a row and never see a muskie there. That doesn't mean that they're not there. It's just one of those things you kind of just have to do the footwork a little bit yourself. It's like take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Right.
So it's pretty much as simple as that. So
Yeah. I know growing up, my dad hooked into one out of 2 lanes.
okay,
A real nice fish. Did a tail walk. We were
yeah,
gone. Just
yeah,
like it's almost like they have a spit reflex that they can just shake that lure right out
yeah.
and you'll never
Well,
see him again.
yeah, and I mean, actually, if you look at there's footage of it sometimes, but what they do is when they realize, hey, I'm hooked, they open their mouth and they head shake. And the thing, and that's one of the main differences when you hook into a muskie, especially, you get into the 20-pound up,
Hmm.
muskies, you feel that really massive head shake. And when they open their mouth and shake, they get all that water tension, you know, sloshing into the lure, and that helps kind of free it. And I mean, I've hooked into muskies before and was joking with the guy next to me, like, oh, I already caught it. And he's like, not till it's in the net, opens its mouth and just boom, gone. And it's just like you could do everything perfect, and sometimes they flop off. You could have a 5-year-old on a Barbie rod hook into one, and they just catch it. Just kind of, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. There's so many important things to it. Having the appropriate gear for it. A lot of people love to argue at the fact that I use 9-foot rods with extra heavy action and 65-pound braid, and they're like, oh, well, I could catch it on an ultralight, and it's like, well, yeah, you can, but then you kind of have to, ask the question, are you showing the fish respect? Because, when they get reeled in, they exert as much energy as they can to get away. So if you're reeling it in on a 6-pound fishing line for an hour, that fish is going to have nothing left. And, it's delayed mortality. It's a research thing. It's proven, that if you capture them and you don't release them correctly, or, you don't treat them to a certain standard during the capturing process, they can die. Sometimes you release it, it looks like it swam away, and it bellies up, 5 minutes later, and if you look at some of the larger lakes like Lake St. Clair and, the Muskie Factory, they get, they've recorded numbers of floating fish every year, and it's almost always attributed to delayed mortality. But the reason for the heavier rods is simply to shorten the fight. You hook into a muskie, you want to get it in the net as quick as you can, get it unhooked, keep it in the water. You take it out for the picture and it goes right back in.
Yeah.
As opposed to some people, they drag it into the boat and they leave it on the floor of the boat flopping around. You figure a 40-inch muskie, 15, 20 years old, they're old. They're not they don't have a high survival rate, so it's hard to get a fish to that age. So, I think educating people and kind of just, sharing that, like, hey, respect the fish mentality, and, not fishing for them when it's, 90-degree water temperatures, because the oxygen levels are low. Those are the little things that I like to really pay attention to when I'm doing it. So
I've seen there's a push recently where guys are actually saying don't even take the fish out of the water. Like do everything that you possibly can in the water. Get a picture of the fish in the water and
yep.
just let it go. Because
Yeah. Pete Mena, I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I haven't.
He's pretty much one of he's my favorite musky fisherman. He's
Mhm.
kind of the guy that I really like to just model after. And he's like one of the biggest, front runners of pushing that movement of, hey, handle them this way. And I mean, he's got tutorial videos online of, hey, this is how you hold them. He's got equipment that he's got sponsors and things.
Right.
But he recommends you the right equipment to use, release tools and handling procedures and things, that he's very proactive in that. It's just really important, because it's like you fish long enough, you're eventually going to accidentally kill one. And that's the worst feeling in the world, when you catch, this huge prized fish that you really want to let go, and it just doesn't make it. I haven't killed too many over the years. I think maybe two,
Yeah.
but it's just one of those things. Like for instance, you're catching a 4-foot fish, it's probably going to be able to swallow whatever lure you have. So nowadays I have a pair of bolt cutters that I use to cut the hooks. Sometimes they eat the entire lure, and you have the lure buried all the way down in its mouth, or in
Uh-huh.
its, as deep as it goes. You don't want to try and go in there, even with, extended pliers. You don't want to rip, you know, big, huge eagle treble hooks out of a fish's belly. So if you just go in there with your bolt cutter, snip the hooks and remove the lure and leave the hooks in there, they'll eventually kind of, rust out or dissolve or whatever. They'll have a higher chance of surviving, as opposed to
Right.
just ripping it out. And it's only a $20 lure, $50 lure, whatever. In the grand scheme of things, you just snip the hooks off and replace them.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, they just want to catch a muskie, so they'll just, whatever they got, they're going out with. They don't have the right net, they don't have pliers, they don't have hook cutters. And the hook cutters will also save you on the chance that you step on a hook or get a hook in yourself. That's a good way to not have to go to the emergency room.
Right.
So, but yeah, release tools and the proper gear is like so crucial to handling them and keeping them safe. So, and it's something I want to be able to do 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So,
Yeah.
if everybody catches them all and we kill them all, there's not going to be any. So
Yeah. And when you're talking about lures, what kind of lures are you guys using? I mean,
So,
obviously,
so
you don't have to give me your secrets,
no, I mean,
but
so it varies depending on the time of year, but a typical rule of thumb, people like to say they like to use downsizer baits in the spring, and then they'll go to bigger baits towards the fall. I think it's more of just kind of a, situational, the situation dictates. It just depends. Me personally, I like a 6-inch lure profile. I think that's perfect. I like to use things like Phantom soft tails. They're just a little glide bait that goes left and right. Little top water walk the dogs, or puck tails. This is kind of like there's like a standard. You got a spinner bait, a crankbait, and a top water. That's like the big three.
hmm
As long as you have some variety of that, you'll have an opportunity at success. But it's like just kind of knowing what water, and if I'm in a lake that has a bunch of shiners, I might be more inclined to throw smaller lures that are shiny. Whereas if I'm in a stream that has a bunch of smallies and carp and stuff, I might throw, a 10-inch or a 12-inch lure that's got, some browns or oranges to it or whatever to kind of match the food in the water that I'm fishing for. So it just kind of depends. Nowadays, the big kick is Medusas, the big rubber baits, they weigh like a pound, 2 pounds, just huge lures. I don't like ruining my reel like that. It's just,
that's fair.
it's, especially, being a predominantly shore fisherman, I don't really have a lot of opportunities where I can throw a 1 pound lure. So I'm usually fishing in 2 feet of water. So it's kind of pointless. So for the most part, I like walk the dogs. If I had to say my favorite, which is just, it's pretty much a cylinder shaped lure, floats on the water and it just pops left and right. I don't know if you've ever heard of a spook for bass.
Is it like a popper?
It's pretty much the same thing. So walk
Okay.
the dog just floats on the water and just
Yep.
you just twitch it and it just dashes left and right. It's the
Yeah.
exact same principle, but you can get them up to probably 2 feet long.
Yeah.
But
I know those when you're running a popper for bass, that
mhm.
hit is super exciting. You
It's
get a nice two
indescribable.
pound bass come up and grab that thing. It's phenomenal. I can't imagine a 30 or 40-inch muskie coming up and taking that thing off the top of the water.
It's incredible. I have a few videos that I've gotten some GoPro footage of it, but there's
hmm
just unless you're standing there doing it, I can't describe it to
Yeah.
you. So it's like a lot of the muskies that I like to fish in kind of those, those places that you think nobody would ever go. You just see that shallow little run of water. There's no fish in there. It's like I've said that a million times, and then you go fish it and you catch a fish. Well, so I like to do a lot of research and kind of find, little tributaries and things that are connected to, the Allegheny River, big lakes that are
hmm
known for muskies. If you got one coming in or out, I like to kind of find those pinch points and go looking for them. So if hopefully we can get into it a little bit this
Oh,
year,
that'd be
but
awesome.
if you ever get the opportunity to be standing in, shin deep water and you reel a topwater lure through that and you see a tree on the edge of the water shake, and then sometimes you'll see their little fins sticking up and it looks like a shark.
Yeah.
But I mean, the most common thing is you'll see your topwater come and you just see a big V right behind it. And sometimes you can watch the fish swim, sometimes very fast, sometimes instantly, sometimes you see, that delayed, here it comes. And it's just like, for me, I almost don't like topwater fishing because my heart is just pounding. It's like even when you're in the shallow water, you get it right up to your feet and then you start that figure eight.
hmm
But when you're standing in the water with a 4 foot fish with a mouth full of teeth, it's not going to attack you, but it still just gives you that
Yeah.
anxiety. You're like, here it comes. And yeah, so there's top water, and then top water on a figure eight is like the next level up to it. Typically, you throw a top water, they're kind of just going to eat it as soon as they can. But every now and then you just get that one, especially in a boat. You'll get up to the boat and you figure eight a couple times. There might be a muskie suspended, 8 to 10 feet down that you can't see,
hmm
and it's just boom. You snap your fingers, it's there, and it just attacks your lure, and this is what keeps you coming back.
Yeah.
Even it's one of the only things where I mean, hunting, I guess too, but just seeing a muskie, that's like a successful day.
Yeah.
So
I had one. So you know how Oil Heritage does the raft race.
yeah, yep,
So a bunch of buddies of mine from college, we did it one summer. We built a raft and we're doing it, and I had this little, I don't know, 5 foot ultralight rod.
yeah,
I got a probably number 8 hook with a mealworm on it, and I'm
no
just
kidding.
kind of anything, I'm
Yeah,
thinking
whatever
maybe a little
bites. Yeah,
smallmouth, a little panfish,
yep.
whatever, and I can still picture it vividly. We're passing a little rock face. You know how the Allegheny is. You get some of those rock face
Hmm.
croppings. And I'm like, well, I'm going to throw right up against that and pull it back out. And I'm pulling it back out, and I can see into the water, and I can see my bait. And I just watch this muskie come up grab that mealworm, do a U-turn, and my line just goes limp. Like,
Yep.
when it just bit through it or
Yeah.
snapped it off or
Yep.
whatever, and it was just like, well, that was amazing. I'm like, did you guys see that? And everybody's like, what are you
Oh,
talking
you're
about? I'm like,
lying. You
no,
didn't.
man, I'm telling you. And
Yeah.
it's just, and like you said, just seeing the fish was
Yep.
phenomenal. I've never even caught one. That's the closest I've ever been to
Okay.
catching one, and it broke my line like that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just their teeth. That's
Yeah.
why I run maybe 110 pound fluorocarbon leaders.
Okay.
There's people that make them online. You could buy the stuff and make it yourself if you're willing to, but it's crucial,
Yeah.
because I don't care if you have 1,000 pound braid.
Yeah.
Their teeth are sharp enough where the poundage doesn't matter. It's going to slice it. The other factor is rocks. We live in Pennsylvania. There's
Hmm.
boulders and rocks. So you hook into a fish and it swims around a rock, and now your line is looped around that rock. It's going to rub on the rock and break. So that's why I like to use the 65 pound braid and the big leaders. It's more so just to kind of protect myself from things like getting my line bit off one. So.
Now, so I used to do a lot of shore fishing. I lived in Delaware when I was in the Air Force and
Hmm.
did a ton of shore fishing. I absolutely loved it. And I was running probably 65-pound braid at the time, maybe a little bit heavier. And I noticed that when I would go every single day,
Hmm.
and that braid would tear my finger up. Did you
Yeah,
ever run into that? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really rough stuff.
Because you
So.
run an open face bail, I'm guessing.
Yep,
So
yep.
yeah, so you throw that. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that. But with those leaders, I got real heavy into tying my own setups at that
Okay.
time. So
Cool.
I have a
Cool.
real
Yeah.
good idea what you're talking about
Yep.
on making those leaders.
Yeah, and I mean, I prefer I forget what it's called, like a crosswalk or something like that.
Hmm.
But there's a way to have the head of the swivel or whatever that it kind of crosses around itself.
Yeah.
It's like a second layer of protection, because I've seen it firsthand, people trying to catch a muskie or a large pike using your typical Walmart steel leader that just kind of goes up and
Hmm.
has that weird little loop in. Those get straightened out very easy.
Yeah.
And that's just something people don't think about. It's like, if you have a big musky rod, like my largest muskie, I caught a 50 incher not last October, so about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
That was up on Lake Pamatuni. I hooked into that fish, and within 15 seconds, it was in the net. And that was like as far out as I could cast.
Hmm.
Hooked into it. It swam almost straight to the boat. But the thing is, that fish was probably 30 pounds, maybe 35. It's a really good muskie. When I got it to the side of the boat, I was able to just kind of manhandle it into the net. If you have one of those older or those cheap steel leaders, you go to manhandle that fish. You have a what 16th of an inch thick, little tiny piece of.
Right.
I mean, I can grab it and straighten it just with my thumbs.
Hmm.
Imagine, a 4 foot fish
Fighting at full
fighting for
force.
its life,
Yeah.
and you're trying to capture it. There's no way that little janky steel leader will last. Sure, it might be able to withstand the teeth cutting it, but it's not going to be able to withstand the tension.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to know your equipment, know what you can get away with, and a lot of that is just experience and doing it. I personally don't do drag.
Okay.
So my drag, I kind of keep it tightened up all the way, and I like to thumb control my drag. So I'll open my bail when I'm catching a muskie. Once I have it hooked on, if I need to, let the fish run a little bit, I pop my bail open and thumb my spool.
Okay.
And it's just a much more touch on my drag, and I can really control the fish. And then when I want to completely lock down the drag again, I just thumb the spool, and now it's just max tension. So in my personal experience, when it comes to catching muskies, like I was telling you earlier, those little 1% things that you can do
Hmm.
better, those are the things that are going to increase your success rate. And it's like, in my personal opinion, trying to go from reeling in a muskie where you need constant tension. You have to have tension on your line. Trying to go from reeling to adjusting a drag to reeling to readjusting, it's too much letting go of, you know, my reel. I just pop the bail open. I keep it tightened all the way down, and if I need some tension, I just pop the bail. And the Dive Alexa 401 is what I use. It's a really comfortable reel. It fits my hand perfect. My thumb rests. It's just a very comfortable rod. I have a 9 foot Legend Tournament St. Croix, and it's got a nice big handle that goes right under my armpit, so it's
Okay.
comfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much just holding it here, and I kind of use my body to work the lure so that I can do it for more than 20 minutes. Because start throwing a big lure and trying to twitch it with your wrists, you're not going to make it very long. So,
Right.
but
Well,
yeah,
that big rod too, because I mean that adds to it
yeah,
quite a bit.
it's tiring. It's definitely something that I have to be proactive in staying in shape and being ready for that year after year because it takes a toll on you, and it's not for the faint-hearted. 90% of people they just want to go out and catch one, but they just have no clue the amount of work that you have to put in, not just mentally but physically, and it's a lot. It's a lot more than just the pictures that you see on
Right,
Instagram. You see, one fish a week or whatever, and you're like, man, this guy's just always catching them. They don't see the 12-hour days that you didn't even see a single fish and you still casted religiously, sun up to sundown, getting rained on, driving 3 hours in the dark to get to this spot, and just kind of all that stuff. People don't really pay attention to that. They just see pictures and
right,
there's all that me too, and it's difficult. It's difficult, because I have people reach out, hey, take me fishing. I want to go fishing with you. And it's like, it's just difficult to do sometimes because you kind of got to pick and choose who you think is actually going to be worth, investing any type of time into this,
right.
because, most people don't want to put in the work. So,
Well, they call it the fish for 1,000 casts. I
yep,
mean, so that right
10,000.
there, they're 10,000. That's
Yep,
right.
yep.
Yeah. So, and I forget somebody did the math on that, and I think they said like if you were casting every 5 minutes or something, it would take you 3 years before you ever caught a fish. I can't remember the exact numbers,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was something crazy like that. But I mean, you guys obviously have it figured out a little bit better than 10,000 casts.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get a little crazy with it sometimes, especially coming from a military family.
Hmm.
My dad was in the army and growing up, hunting, we were painting our face, we were, sneaking around commando and stuff. So even as, I've gotten a little bit older and I'm in my 30s now, my dad's pushing 60, we still, even fishing, we'll take it that serious, when we really want to catch them,
Right.
If we're just out going out, sure, we'll just walk around and fish and joke or whatever. But when we're like, hey, really want to catch one, the color of our clothes matters. I'll try to wear clothes that blend into the background of what I'm going to be fishing on because I don't want to have like a white t-shirt or something that's going to be very obviously silhouetted to the fish swimming towards me. When I go into some of these spots, I'll walk into chest deep water going 6 inches at a time to not cause any ripples, just to get as sneaky as I can to get that perfect first cast because I can't tell you how many times we show up, first cast, catch a fish immediately, and then you don't see anything else all day.
Hmm.
But it's just like, yeah, we'll take it that serious, and we'll try to not disturb the water. We'll try and be very meticulous about, how we approach each hole, and sometimes I'll be casting a certain hole and I won't be able to, I won't be seeing anything, won't be catching any fish. I might back out of the water, loop up 800 yards, cross into the other side of the creek and come down the other side if that's what I think, it'll take if I
Mhm.
think that, that structure over there is holding fish or something. But that's just all part of the game. It's always fun, kind of taking it serious and seeing, what you can do. But yeah, you definitely aren't going to catch them in the living room. So
No,
that's
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 fair.
about as simple as it gets. Yeah.
You mentioned the muskie factory up north there. Have you guys made a trip up there?
So I've actually never been there. I know there's an older gentleman. His name's William Wakehoff. I think he's got to be about 65
Hmm.
now. He's the one who really taught me how to musky fish. I was probably, I mean, I had been catching muskie since I was a kid, but we were live baiting, with bluegill
Right.
and pretty chub. I didn't really know how to cast for them. This guy kind of introduced me to it. He's the one who really showed me all the right gear. And I mean, he's got 10 setups and 1500
Right.
lures, and so he really kind of took me under his wing and let me use his equipment for years. We've always been close. And I consider him a friend even though he's twice
Right.
my age.
Yeah.
But he's the one who introduced me to Lake St. Clair, the muskie factory. And that's kind of that's one of those things we've been playing around with, wanting to get up there someday. There's this one guy, he works out of Canada because it goes up through
Yep.
Canada. His name's Kyle Moxon. He runs Moxon's Guide Service. He's a muskie guide. And pound for pound, when it comes to just putting big fish in the boat, I mean, this guy is just, he's next level. I mean, he's got to be mid 20s at this point. I've been following him for 8 years now, and it's just like they'll have 50, they'll catch 50 fish in one day
Oh,
sometimes.
dang.
I mean, they caught, I mean, he's got pictures. I mean, he's got thousands of pictures of him with clients holding, two people side by side holding a 57 and a 54-inch muskie that they're caught at the same time. And, he's just, he has that lake so down to a T that he knows how to catch fish. He goes out, his clients love him, they catch fish, and he does walleye and smallies and I think steelhead and stuff too.
Right.
But I mean, muskie is definitely his bread and butter, and it's like, would I love the opportunity to go up there and just kind of try it myself someday? Sure. But when you're looking at a lake that's got 10,000, 15, 20,000 acres or whatever, it's
Hmm.
like you could potentially never see a single
Yeah.
fish going up there, even though it's called the muskie factory, and there's on average one muskie per acre of the lake or whatever the number is. So, but he is someone that if I ever do decide to go up that way, I would just want to go up there with him on his guide service and just kind of enjoy that.
Yeah. It'd probably be a really good learning experience too.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because like I had told you earlier, I'm predominantly a shore fisherman,
Mm.
so I've caught some out of boats, but you could attribute that to just being at the right place at the right time. And some of those guys like Kyle Moxon, they do a lot of trolling, and they have it down to a science. They know what lures to use and where, and they know all the valleys and the
Right.
topography of the lake and whatnot. So it would definitely be really cool to just go out there. I think he just seems like he has a good personality off of his presence online.
Right.
So just the opportunity to meet him and hang out with him and fish would be fun. I think I could, learn a ton of information just off of being on his boat and seeing, how he runs his rigs and just watching him run some of the lures and stuff. I'm personally not a big fan of trolling, but I would for that opportunity just to do that.
Yeah. I gotta say, you're definitely the first person that I've ever heard talk about their clothing when they go fishing outside of just like UV protection or sun protection. I
Hmm.
mean, I've fished my entire life and never once have I been like, well, I'm going to be fishing this environment. I should wear this color clothes. That's insane to me that you guys are taking it to that level of detail to catch these fish. And I mean, I know that being the predator that they are, they're obviously, it's a lot harder than catching a bluegill or a
Hmm.
trout or whatever, but never have I even considered like, oh, I gotta wear a different color shirt so that I blend in. Even going up, I don't know if you've ever been up to the steelhead fishing in Erie.
I know of it.
Yeah, so like those guys get a little bit in the weeds on that stuff too, but I've never seen anybody that's like matching their clothes to the background
Yeah.
though. So that's some insane stuff to me. I mean, it's awesome that you guys are taking it to that level. I mean, it shows
The new perspective, yeah.
yeah, and it shows in your success. Like I've seen
Mhm.
your pictures online, and I mean, it's just amazing the fish that you guys are putting on the shore every year. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because I left the Marine Corps in 2015.
hmm.
So it was in the fall that year. So spring 2016 was when I met Bill and his Bill, Baron, his brother, Bob, his cousin. They have been catching muskies since before I was born, a long time. And it was actually I got laughed at. That this is the way the clothing thing came into play. My first time going with them, I didn't have fishing waders. I didn't have, rods and
Hmm.
reels. So I showed up in, March when the water's still 40 degrees. I showed up in cargo shorts and freak shoes
Yep.
and a bright orange t-shirt. And they two of them were laughing at me and Bob was visibly angry at me. This is the first time I met him and he's like they were flabbergasted.
Yeah.
They like because to them that's just they know that you gotta have the right color clothes and stuff. To me, I'm just going to hang out with some old guys fishing.
Yeah.
And like the way that they treated me in that moment wasn't necessarily bad, but they were just it was like to them that was just a fundamental thing. They're like, how do you not know to do this? And like you were saying, it was something that I had never even considered.
Right.
And since that day, I piggybacked him for that entire summer. I think we fished 80 out of 90 days of that summer. I mean, it was just every day. I mean, miles and miles and miles. We fished all over PA and learned all kinds of lessons from him that I would never be able to spit back out. But it was
Right.
just really cool thinking of some of just meeting people and learning. Like I love going back on that same those 1% differences. Those are there's those little minor details matter so much, not just in outdoors and stuff, but your day-to-day life. Something as simple as when I wake up in the morning, am I going to make my bed or not? Is that really a big deal? No, but you make your bed as soon as you wake up. I just won the first battle of the day.
Right.
Am I gonna brush my teeth or am I just gonna leave? Am I gonna brush my teeth and floss my teeth? Am I gonna make breakfast or am I gonna buy it on the go? All those little 1% things. Just I just kind of like to try to win just win as many little battles as I can. Because it's like it just helps. It just helps, and that little minor progress matters a lot. When you look at the big picture, and you're like let's say you've never been musky fishing. Oh, I want to start musky fishing. There's no way I could musky fish. Look at these guys; they catch these fish all the time. They do it with a blindfold on. There's no way I could do all of that. It's like, well, what if I backed you up and told you, hey, do you know how to use a bait caster? Well, yeah, I know how to use a bait caster. Have you ever reeled a lure in? Yeah. Try this bait caster and this lure. Oh wow, it runs pretty much the same. It's just bigger. It's just kind of simplify things, and it's
Yeah.
not it's not so scary to try and tackle this huge thing when you break it down into those 1% things. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how I like to attack it.
That's definitely the best way to go about doing just about anything. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely,
you start
absolutely.
looking at the whole picture and it gets overwhelming really quickly, but then take it, like you said, bite by bite, and
Yep.
it's a lot easier. So,
Yeah, it's just like a funny joke my uncle used to tell me was, "What's the most efficient way to eat a whale? One bite at a time." You
yeah,
know, so it's simple stuff like that.
yeah.
So.
That's some awesome stuff, man. Like I said, I've seen what you guys have been doing out there. It's some really cool things to sit back and watch from the sidelines. Those fish are absolutely amazing. Especially, I've never been around one, so
Yeah,
seeing you
yeah, I
guys pull
definitely
them in all
appreciate
the
it,
time.
man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to linking up with you and getting out there this year. It's an experience. The
Yeah,
first time you like, because you could look at a million pictures, but the first time you see like an actual big muskie in person, it almost looks fake.
yeah,
My first 4 footer, I caught a 49-inch muskie, 2017. There were some kids swimming in the swimming hole with dogs and stuff that we wanted to fish, so we left, went out to breakfast or something, showed up. They're getting out of the water. They're on the beach in towels, and I'm walking past them with a 10-inch muskie lure. First cast in, boom, 49-inch muskie, right in front of all these people. By the time I got it into the shoreline, my buddy Bill netted it, and the next thing I know, I blinked and I've got a dozen or 2 dozen people standing around me. Everybody's just clamoring and saying all these things. I'm looking at this fish next to my feet in this net, and I've never seen anything like this. And I
right.
mean, it wasn't. It was 49 inches, but it was skinny. So, comparatively to some of the more prized muskies, it's not really that crazy to some of the guys doing it. But for me at that time, that was just such. I mean, my brain couldn't comprehend it. I felt like I was looking at a fake fish.
Yeah,
And even when, my buddy was like, hey, you ready for the picture? Just reaching down to grab it, I was terrified, and I'm 23, I'm 23, I got tattoos, and I was in the Marines, I lived overseas, and then here I am, heart pounding out of my chest, trying to pick up a fish out of the net, and it's like, if you actually look at the photo from that fish, I could have opened that fish's mouth and put my entire head
that's insane.
into his mouth. It was just incredible.
That's insane. Those are the
So,
type of fish you think of in the ocean.
yeah, and
Not like little tiny streams in nowhere, Pennsylvania. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know, I know you guys have fished right below my parents' house there on Oil Creek. So where State Park Road is, there's the big ridge right before that. My
yep.
parents' house is right there. So
Oh, okay.
I caught a northern in there one
Yep,
year,
that's
maybe 30, it's nothing big,
yeah.
20, 30 inches somewhere in there. That's the closest I've ever been to one of those fish. But
So,
we've seen them.
little fun fact for you, there are muskies
Yeah.
in Oil Creek there. And I have spent my entire life trying to catch a muskie in Oil Creek.
Yeah.
That's one of those challenges. And I'm like, hey, I've told my wife and my best friends and everybody, when I die, I want my ashes to go back into Oil Creek. That's where I grew up. That's where I
Yep.
learned to fish.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
grown up in the area. It's unless you've been there, you just can't put it on paper. It's just something you have to experience. But I've argued with older fishermen, people my age. Oh, there's no muskies in here, and I'm like, dude, I've grown up in this creek. They're in here.
Oh, without a
The
doubt.
river's right here. Well, probably 5 years ago, I won't say the name of the guy because I'm not too fond of him nowadays. But the guy that I knew, one day I was down at Oil Creek muskie fishing, and he just casually shows up trout fishing and catches a 37-inch muskie right in the hole by your parents' house, right under the bridge.
Mm.
37-inch muskie, nice, healthy, good body. Um, and it made me sick, because I was just upset, and it was a real big conflict for me because I wanted to be happy for my friend, but I was so jealous
Right.
because he doesn't even care about this stuff. That's like the second one he's ever caught. I've been trying to check this off my list my entire life, and somebody else got it. And then fast forward last year, I caught my first muskie ever out of Oil Creek.
Nice.
Same spot, right under the bridge. I have a photo. It's hilarious. It's a little tiny 8 to 10 inch
Yeah.
muskie. What?
Hey, a fish is a fish, man.
Yeah, yeah, and that spot right there, a lot of my family and friends call that Mark's fishing hole
Yeah.
because that's that right there where Cherry Run comes out.
Yep. Yep.
It's been packed with pike since the dawn of time,
Yeah.
and there will be pike and muskies periodically in there forever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pike in there. Muskies are like you might see one a year in there because they just travel up the river,
Yeah.
check it out, because there's a bunch of stock trout in there, and then they make their way back. But yeah, Oil Creek's incredible, man.
I love that.
I've caught a little bit of everything in there.
Absolutely. I mean, literally everything. We caught a snakehead out of there one year. I
Wow,
mean,
yeah,
we had a bowfin that we were
yep,
chasing up at the dam one year. Like I said, my parents' house is literally 200 feet from the creek. The property line actually goes right up to the edge of the water, and that bridge is right there. And I mean, that was every
is
day.
that first house on the corner there?
So if you're going north on 8, going towards Titusville,
You
right
turn
before,
left.
it'd be right before the bridge. It's the last one on the
Oh, right
left
before
before
the
the
bridge.
bridge. If
Okay,
you're
yeah,
going north, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
yep.
So I mean, we literally had a path from the bank
You
down
guys
to
have
the
like a big.
water.
There's a pretty big open yard or field there or something, right?
It's a decent sized yard. They
Something
have
there,
a
yeah.
pool in there, and there's
Because
like a
there's a few
garage.
houses going down the creek there, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So if you know where Northwest Heating is,
Yep.
yeah. So there's a house right after Northwest Heating, and then there's one more house on the bridge. It's that last house
Got
before
you.
the bridge.
Got you.
So
Got you.
I mean, that was every day we were in that water, and I mean, like you said, everything. The smallmouth spawn there, so the stream comes down, uh, running south there, and it comes past the bridge, and there's a point off the end of that bridge, and the smallmouth love that.
Yep.
Every spring they spawn right
Yeah.
there. I caught the same fish every year, like 4 years in a row.
And I
I
believe it too.
I only know this because right below its dorsal fin, there's like this scar,
This
and it
specific.
had
Yep.
the same scar every year, and it's just, but I could never catch it in season because
Yeah.
this is like, I mean, it was like an 8 pound fish,
Wow. Yeah.
and
Incredible.
but I could never keep it because I
Mhm.
always caught it before season. And
Yep.
by the time spawn was done, they
They're
left.
just
They were no
gone wherever
longer
they go.
there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that water, like you're saying, I mean, from there, from Cherry Run up to you have the dam up
Yep.
about a mile north, and then about another 200 yards, 300 yards north of that, you got that big bend right there where it opens up.
Yeah.
That whole body of
That's
water is
incredible.
just my
Yep.
childhood.
Yep.
So,
It's funny, because we grew up in the same area.
yeah.
My dad lives, the YMCA.
Yep.
My dad lives in the alley by the YMCA.
Okay.
I could probably throw a football and hit the YMCA from his front step.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was come from a poor family, so we didn't have cars and stuff. So if I wanted to go fish cherry tree, guess how I got there?
You walked,
We
biked.
walked. We walked.
Yep.
We walked or biked, and usually we were walking because what's a great idea? Let's go under the bridge by McDonald's and let's walk the shoreline
Yep.
all the way to Cherry Tree and back. And it was like, as a kid, that was nothing.
Yep.
That's a day trip. But when I
Absolutely.
think about it as an adult, I'm like, holy shit, that's like 7 miles, like one way.
Yeah.
And
Easily,
we just
especially with the curves and everything
in
at the
the
stream.
creek,
Yeah.
and I mean, me and my best friend Blaze, we would, hey, ask your mom for some money. Oh, my mom said no. I'll ask my dad. We would scrounge up 5, 10, whatever, whatever amount of dollars we could scrounge up at, 10, 12, 13
Mm-hmm.
years old. We'd go down to the gas station and we'd, they used to sell this big roll of like maple ice donut twists.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we'd get a big pack of those and then we'd get a jug of tea
Yep.
and we would just backpack it and we would just
Yeah.
see you later, mom and dad. We're young teenagers on the water at sunrise, and you
Mm-hmm.
would just see us at dark. And we had no cell phones. There was no worrying whether we were okay.
No,
We just
you just went. You were on
kids
the
out
water
doing it.
all
Yeah,
day.
and that's just been my entire life
Yeah.
is just kind of doing stuff like that. So it's natural to me. It's just what you do.
So, do you know in Plummer, where Donnie's bait shop used to be?
Hmm.
Well, yeah. So I made a deal with him one summer because I didn't have any money personally. My family wasn't that off, but I didn't have any money personally, and we wanted live bait.
Okay,
Dad's like, I'm not buying you bait. If you want bait, either
go
go
get it.
catch it or make money. So I would ride the four-wheeler up Old Bankston to the backside of Donnie's property, and he let me make a trail from the road up to his house.
Okay,
And I would go mow and weed whack his yard so that we had bait to fish with all
that's
summer
awesome.
long.
That's
And I mean,
awesome.
that's what I would do. I'd do that, and then like there was three of us, my brother and one of our buddies, that we just fished. I would just supply the bait all
Yeah.
summer, and it was just an absolute blast.
That's actually ironic because my Instagram name Catching Creek Chubs.
Hmm.
I always tell people my first job was selling bait fish, and the little money hack that I had discovered when I was, let me see, I was living in Lisbon, Ohio. That's probably 90 minutes from here.
Hmm.
Very similar, geography to here. Um, there were these two fishermen who would they would come to this creek that was right by my parents' home, and it was just, if you were fishing a creek like this in PA, that's the ones that you'd be getting brook trout and stuff. And,
Yeah.
those little natural clear water, creeks or maybe a couple feet wide. Well, this one right by my house just happened to be polluted with creek chubs, tons of them. And we would go down there with little tiny minnow hooks and
Yep.
bread. And, if you didn't have bread, we'd go steal a pack of bubble gum from the store and use gum, or, being kids, this was at, 7, 8 years old, because I was, I think I was in third grade at the time living over there. And anyhow, these two older fishermen, to me, they were just adults. So
Right.
I cannot tell you with any accuracy whether they were 25 or
Right.
55, but they came down to the creek one day around noon, and they were coming to catch creek chubs. And they saw me and, my buddies down there, and they had a bucket, and they're like, hey, do you guys want to make some money? We're like, yeah, fetch us a bucket of creek chubs. We're going to go get lunch. When we come back, we'll pay you for them. These guys went out to lunch. They came back. I think they gave us $20 or $40 or whatever.
Right.
I mean, back then we're
You're
rich.
rich.
We're
Yeah.
rich now. So somehow, and this is just incredible to think about, but somehow, some way, we coordinated with these two random adults that we're going to meet them here at this creek every Sunday at noon, and we're going to exchange these creek chubs for this money.
Yep.
And we did that. And I mean, I probably made, 100 or $200 over that summer selling these random guys creek chubs that I caught out of the creek. So just kind of that's where the catching creek chubs,
Yeah.
because that's where it all started for me, just catching creek chubs. I
Yeah.
didn't, we weren't allowed to go bass fishing and cat fishing and musky fishing because we were, second and third grade, and it was like
Right.
we just had the creek right by the house, and that
Mm-hmm.
was just all they had in there was creek chubs. There was nothing else to fish for. So that was just kind of, we obsessed over that. And I mean, the amount of adventures and stuff that we went on, and just exploring and doing that. But yeah, that was my
Yep.
first job, selling creek chubs to these little
That's
boys.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
That kind of stuff is just phenomenal.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. This you just can't. You don't get those type of experiences without having an outdoor lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
People that don't like going outdoors, they don't have these stories. They don't have like our childhood. Like even so, my family was pretty well to do for our area, anyways. But
Mhm.
still, my entire childhood, like I said, we were in the water. We were fishing, whether throwing rocks. We was illegal as hell. We built a dam under that bridge every year
I
for
made a
like
swimming
four
hole
years.
on the
Is
same side as your parents' home. I've
Yep,
I've
yep.
swam in it a million
Absolutely.
times.
Yep.
So.
And not only that, but that little it created a back eddy right there.
Yep.
And the fish just loved that. We built the dam, then we'd fish off of it
Hmm.
and trout, everything.
They'd
It
pull
was
right up in
just
there. Yeah.
amazing. I actually hooked one of my buddies in the right in the back
Mm.
one year because we were both standing on it, casting opposite
Yep.
directions, and I got him right. I
Yeah.
felt bad, but
Yeah. You'll
you
have
know,
that. You'll
yeah.
have that.
So
Yeah, and that's it's kind of sad to me because we could talk about all kids nowadays,
yeah.
and it's like I get it, I'm a big proprietor of technology, and I obviously benefit from the advancements in that
Yep.
every day. I'm not gonna say that I'm against video games or
Right.
any of that thing, anything of that nature, but it's sad to me, because we have all these incredible stories, and to me that's just one of the beautiful things of life is
Yeah.
experiencing the world. It's not just, your cell phone or your video game or your high school stuff. It's all of it, and I've been really fortunate to, live in Japan. I lived in California, I've lived in South Carolina, Missouri, I visited Texas and drove, Route 66, so I've driven from Pennsylvania to San Diego and back by myself, so I've got to go around. I went to Mexico for 2 weeks 2 years ago. My fiance lives in a village called Oaxaca. It's like the southern border, almost in Panama. Being a white guy from Pennsylvania on the southern border of Mexico was just I've just got to experience all kinds of life, and I love it. I love nature, all of that. And I have friends and family who grew up here with us who have never been in the woods before.
Yeah.
I was just discussing this with a coworker this year, and he's like, "I've never been in the woods." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like ever?" He's like, "No, I've never, just never really went." It's like you're almost 30 years old and you've never lived anywhere but Western Pennsylvania,
Yeah,
and you've never been fishing. You've never went into the woods. You've just stayed on the paved road your entire life, and it's just like it's so sad to me. It's like, man, you're just missing out on such a beautiful thing. I know people that travel from all around the world
right.
just to come get a taste of this, and you've lived here your whole life and you never got to see it. It's just it's sad. That's why I love trying to introduce people to it as
Absolutely.
much as I can. So
That is hands down my favorite thing. That's every year, especially turkey, because turkey's the easiest thing to get somebody into and get them hooked on. Because you hear that turkey
fun
gobbling.
fact, I've never killed a turkey the right way.
Well, I think we're gonna change that this year,
Okay.
hopefully.
Okay.
So I would absolutely love to take you and get
Yeah.
you a bird,
Yeah, I'd
but
love to. So
because the barrier to entry is really low. Everybody either has a shotgun or knows somebody that
yep.
has a shotgun they
Yep.
can borrow. You don't need any crazy camo. You just need enough to cover your face and your body, and you're good to go. Don't have to go break the bank on
Yeah.
it. Get Walmart. And I've taken a couple people out now, and some of them now they now own bows. They've gone. They've looked at buying a boat to start going fishing and stuff. And
That's
it's like
awesome.
that's my favorite thing. Even if there's been years where I didn't kill a bird, but I was involved in three birds going down, those
Yep.
years are way better than like
Oh yeah.
I killed.
Absolutely.
At this point, I probably got 5 or 6 longbeards under my belt, and
Mhm.
it's 10 times better when I take somebody and they get their first bird
Absolutely.
versus me taking myself out and
Yeah.
getting one. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's
yeah.
for me. It's the same with musky fishing. When I go out musky fishing, like for instance, if you and I went together,
Hmm.
you might not like it. Blaze, he gets really mad at me when I do this, but I'll just coincidentally not fish.
Yeah.
Usually for the first couple minutes, or if we're progressing, along the waterway, I like to kind of let whoever, whether it's the newest fisherman or if everybody there is an experienced fisherman. Usually we kind of like to let whoever's on the longest dry spell,
Hmm.
we kind of like to let them get the first crack, and if it's not that, it's whoever's the newest fisherman, and it's sometimes, if it's just two men fishing together, some people are a little resistant to that. They're like, hey
Yeah.
man, like, don't be doing me any favors. I just want to catch one if I can catch
Yeah.
one. And it's like, yeah, I understand that. I'm also a male. I like to do things
Yep.
myself, but you know, being someone who's got 10,000 hours of
Exactly.
fishing in my life, it's like I'm willing to, take
Yeah.
that back seat. And if push comes to shove and my buddy won't fish, if I'm not fishing, I will just coincidentally fish an area, or
Right.
I'll just, nonchalantly let them kind of get the better cracks at stuff. So I love seeing people catch fish,
Yeah.
I mean, really anything, it's just sharing that experience, it's what I love. So
No, I definitely understand that. Well, one more time, if you want to tell people where they can find you, I know you got an Instagram page.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just catching, CATCHIN, Freak Chubs. It's just a little Instagram page. I'm not super proactive in posting, but I do like to post, just fishing pictures or hunting, whatever. So yeah,
Okay.
that's the handle. Mark Hutchinson's name, 32.
And if you got any closing thoughts you'd like to wrap up with.
Not really. Stay
All right,
fishing.
man.
Keep to it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by and having a listen. Hopefully, you enjoyed it as much as I did. Remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And remember, take someone outside.